Good evening and welcome to the May meeting of the Committee of Adjustments. Before we begin, I will ask Mr. Miller to read the territorial acknowledgement.
We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you. I would like to introduce our committee, and to my right here is Mr. Miller, Ms. Collier, and Mr. Roth. I'm getting a little echoey here. I'm wondering, are we good? The dial? Sorry, everyone. Is that the wrong way? Are we good? We're good? Under the desk. Is that better? Slightly better. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Sit back further. You've done this before, Wayne. Sorry about that. As well with us is Cameron Miller, a planner for the township. My name is Tyler Bowman, and I'm the chair of the Committee of Adjustments. We are an independent body appointed by Wilmot Township Council. We have the power to make minor changes to existing zoning regulations and to approve some changes to existing non-conforming uses and to give consent. Each applicant will be notified in writing of the decision within 10 days, and with the decision, there'll be instructions on how to appeal it. Any decision made by this committee can be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal, who will then hold a meeting and make a final decision. Only the applicant and certain prescribed public agencies can appeal the committee's decision. If the decision on a minor variance is not appealed, it becomes final and binding after 20 days from the date of this meeting. If the decision on a consent is not appealed, it becomes final and binding after 20 days from the date of the decision is mailed. The format of this meeting will be as follows. Mr. Miller will introduce the applicant or application. The applicant will then be invited forward to add any additional information they choose. Following this, anyone in the audience or virtually will have the opportunity to speak for or against the application. The committee members may then ask questions of the applicant, and the committee will then make a final decision. So before we begin, I'd just like to ask the committee, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, I'll invite Mr. Miller to introduce our first applicant.
Yes, thank you. The first application is minor variance AO3/24 with respect to 1427 Gingrich Road in Baden. And so this application is proposing to reduce the side yard setback requirement from 3.6 meters to approximately 2 meters to allow for an addition. So the subject property is essentially a warehouse and a coffee shop, which is Baden Coffee, which probably many people here are familiar with. So the applicants are proposing to construct a small addition, about 60 square meters on the western side of the building, and that's proposed to accommodate a customer seating area. The proposed addition is set to comply with all other regulations within the industrial zone, Zone 10. And if this application were to be approved tonight, prior to acceptance of a building permit, it would go through a detailed site plan review process to review lot grading and drainage, stormwater management related to the addition, and associated parking lot enhancements, since there's obviously going to be some increased capacity to that building. In circulating the application, no concerns were received, and staff are recommending approval of the application.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to speak on behalf of this application?
The applicant has raised their hand, so I'm going to add them to the meeting. If you
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Awesome. Yeah, as Cameron stated, that's kind of what we're going for. We're looking to add additional parking. We're going to be going through the site plan approval process as well. It's just adding interior seating to the already existing use that's there.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to comment on this application? Seeing nobody, does the committee have any questions for the applicant? None at this time. Can I get a motion to approve this application? Moved by Ms. Lalonde, seconded by Ms. Collier. All in favor? And that is moved. Mr. Miller, the next one.
Thank you. The next application is A04/24 concerning 39 Ritz Crescent in New Hamburg. So this application is proposing to reduce the rear yard setback requirement of a main building from 7.5 meters to approximately 2 meters, 2.12 meters to be exact, to allow for a covered deck. And so the property is currently developed with a single detached dwelling and an attached garage. It's the applicant's intent to construct a deck attached to the rear of the house, and with a deck covered by a roof, it's therefore considered technically to be an addition in the eyes of the regulations of the zoning bylaw, so it's subject to the same regulations as an addition would be with a rear yard of 7.5 meters. If the structure were to be detached, such as a pergola, things like that, it would have a setback requirement of only 0.6 meters. So again, this setback is beyond what you would typically find of a covered deck structure in this area. And in the case it were detached, it would comply with all the other regulations in the zoning bylaw. In circulating the application, staff did not receive any concerns and are recommending that it be approved.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to speak? You good? Okay, anyone else interested in speaking for or against this application? Seeing no one, committee, any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, could I have a motion from the committee to, on this application? Mr. Roth, seconded by Mr. Martin. All in favor? And that is carried. I'll ask for the next one, Cameron.
Yes, thank you. Moving on to A05/24 concerning 116 Hunsberger Drive in Baden. And so this application is proposing to reduce the exterior side yard setback requirement, which in this case is 4.68 meters to approximately 1.79 meters to allow for the construction of a pool shed. And so the property is currently developed with a single detached dwelling. Permit was issued earlier in the year for a pool, and subsequently they applied for a separate permit for a pool shed. And during permit review, it was discovered that it was located within the exterior side yard setback requirement. Being that this property is on a corner, it has an exterior side yard which is well above the typical 2 feet, 0.6 meters that you'd find on an interior side yard for a shed. So really the intent of that greater setback is to maintain visibility along corners. But in the case here with the placement of the pool shed, staff would suggest that it would not cause any visibility concerns with the direct placement of this structure. The locations, it's well outside of the corner visibility triangle as well as the driveway visibility triangle for the property south of where this pool shed is going to be located, and it wouldn't cause any additional site issues to cars backing in and out of this property. There's already a fence in that area, obviously, with there being a pool. And in circulating the application, we didn't receive any concerns and are recommending that it be approved.
Thank you, and I'll ask if the applicant would like to come forward to speak to it. No? Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak?
There is an applicant that's attending virtually. If you'd like to speak on the application, you can just use the raise hand function, and if not, then that's also fine.
Okay, so I'll back up here a moment. Anyone like to speak in the audience for or against this application? Seeing no one, I'll ask the committee if you have any questions. No? So could I get a motion from the committee on this application? Ms. Lalonde, moved by, seconded by Ms. Collier. All in favor? And that motion is carried. And back to you, Cameron.
Yes, thank you. Moving on to A06/24. This application is concerning 466 Fairview Street in New Hamburg. So this application's proposing to increase the maximum allowable area of all accessory buildings from 75% of the lot coverage of the main building to approximately 109%. So this property is currently developed with a single detached dwelling. It was constructed pre-1900, and it's been the applicant's intention to demolish the dwelling, but that plan has currently been put on hold. And so in the interim, and for as well as a long-term solution, they're going to be constructing an additional dwelling unit, which would put them over the cap for the current maximum for detached accessory buildings on this property. And so with the size of the current home, because the calculation is relative to the size of the main building, it would put them over the 75%. And so while it represents 109% of the current footprint of the home, it represents really less than 2.5% of the overall property. And when the new home is going to be constructed, that calculation will come down substantially. But regardless of whether the applicants do end up proceeding with the demolition of that home and a construction of a new home, the increase in the maximum allowable area staff feel is appropriate on the size of this property given the current size of the existing dwelling. And the recommendation is worded so that if they do proceed with building a new house, that 109% doesn't shift to a much larger dwelling. So in circulating the application, staff didn't receive any concerns and are recommending approval.
Would the applicant like to speak on behalf of this application? Not attending virtually? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak for or against this application? Seeing no one, committee, do you have any questions for the? No? Could I get a motion from the committee on this application? Moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Mr. Roth. All in favor? And that motion is carried. And we'll move on to the next one.
Yes, thank you. The next application is A07/24 concerning 1685 Nafziger Road. And so this application is proposing to reduce the minimum lot area requirement of a recognized lot within Zone 1 from 0.65 hectares to approximately 0.57 hectares, which would then facilitate a lot addition as proposed by consent application B09/24, which is also before the committee tonight. So the subject property is an existing non-farm lot, so again with approximately 0.65 hectares in area. The neighboring property, 1693 Nafziger Road, is seeking to acquire a small section of their property, basically obviously as a lot addition. Within Zone 1 agricultural, the lots that don't comply with the minimum lot area requirement of 100 acres and that were existing at the time of the passing of the bylaw are considered to be recognized lots. So this lot is recognized, meaning that its current area in its current form is recognized. So any further reductions to that would require a variance to bring that lot area requirement down. The piece in question is a small triangular piece, doesn't add much in terms of development potential to the owner, and staff would suggest that reduction to 0.57 hectares is certainly minor and meets the intent of the zoning bylaw. In circulating the application, we did not receive any concerns and are recommending that it be approved.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to speak? No? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak for or against this application? Seeing no one, committee, do we have any questions for the applicant?
Sorry, are we just moving on the matter of variance at this point?
That's correct. Yeah. Seeing none, can I get a motion from the committee on this application? Moved by Ms. Lalonde, seconded by Ms. Collier. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Mr. Miller, on to the next.
Yes, thank you. Moving on to the consent applications for the evening. The first one being B07/24, 27 Christian Street in Baden. And so this application is proposing to sever approximately 235 square meters from Lot 7 of Plan 16 to be added to Lot 6 on Plan 16 as a lot addition. So the subject property is comprised of 2 whole lots on a plan of subdivision. So by definition, the legal description being Lot 6 and Lot 7. So they are 2 whole lots on a plan of subdivision. So that means that they can currently be conveyed separately, but the existing single detached dwelling is built over that lot line between Lot 6 and 7. And so to be conveyed separately without any encroachment, the applicant is proposing a lot addition from Lot 7 to Lot 6. And the proposed retained portion of Lot 7 would fully comply with the regulations of residential zone, Zone 2B, and would continue to retain the potential for development. In circulating the application, staff did not receive any concerns and are recommending approval of the consent.
Thank you. Is the applicant in attendance? No? Is there anyone who would like to speak for or against this application? Seeing no one, committee, do we have any questions? Okay, so can I get a motion from the committee on this application? Moved by Mr. Roth, seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Okay, on to the next consent item.
Yes, thank you. Moving on to B08/24, which concerns 11 Cecil Kennedy Court in Petersburg. So this application is proposing to sever a little over 16,000 square meters as a new residential lot while retaining approximately 3,100 square meters. And so the subject property is a nearly 2-hectare parcel of land, about 5 acre, located in the settlement area of Petersburg. It has frontage both on Cecil Kennedy Court and on Snyder's Road East. The applicant is proposing to sever the rear portion of the lands, which consists again of around 16,000 square meters, which is about 1.6 hectares, as a new residential lot while retaining the front portion, which again comprises of a little over 3,000 square meters. The proposed severed lands are currently zoned and would continue to be zoned Z2F residential, would have the potential to be developed with a single detached dwelling and accessory uses. There are no proposed changes to the zoning of the property, being this is just a consent application. Prior to filing an application for consent, I'm trying to avoid the feedback, the applicant went through a detailed pre-submission process to identify a full list of studies and documents in support of the application. The applicant has since provided and received clearance on several technical studies which demonstrate the development of these rear lands is feasible from a technical aspect and could occur without impact on abutting properties. One of those studies was a hydrogeological assessment, and that was required to assess any potential impacts of a new septic system on groundwater. And so the study was reviewed by the Region of Waterloo, and having adequately addressed and demonstrated that there is no adverse impact. The proposed lot configurations and area are supported by the findings of the study, and that's how those lot configurations were derived. And second to that, the property owner also needed to obtain preliminary approval from the Grand River Conservation Authority. So they had been heavily involved in a pre-submission process for this application, and as part of that, GRCA had requested that the applicant verify the extent of the floodplain through a topographical survey, and that all development could be located entirely outside of this area. I'm just getting a pop-up on my screen. The applicant has since satisfied GRCA conditions. They were once again circulated as part of this application, and they stated that they have no issues with this proposal. As I mentioned earlier, the property has legal frontage onto 2 roads. While it does have legal frontage onto Snyder's Road East, that area is specifically within the floodplain, and GRCA has commented that in order to satisfy their regulations and requirements for an access to this area, it would be challenging, and therefore an entrance is proposed off of Cecil Kennedy Court. The Township of Wilmot's Infrastructure Services Department was also circulated, and they had no issues from a technical standpoint. The proposed lot configuration is set to have a dedicated and separate driveway off of Cecil Kennedy Court, and it's going to utilize an existing driveway that's already existing along some of the rear of the properties that front onto Notre Dame. As a condition of consent, the applicant would be required to obtain an access permit, from Cecil Kennedy prior to the creation of the lot. And so as part of a future building permit application, should this application be approved tonight, they'd also be required to submit a lot grading and drainage plan through a future building permit process. So tonight is simply dealing with the creation of a lot, and there are several studies that would still need to occur as part of a building permit, and several approvals, being entrance and grading as two. In circulating the application, staff did receive some concerns from nearby property owners. Their concerns stemmed around GRCA regulations, some concerns with potential impact on privacy, and comments relating to the driveway configuration. The current zoning of this property would already allow for development of the rear lands. They have development potential, and that has not changed. Without any additional approvals, they could seek to build additional one-story detached accessory structures, whether that's an additional dwelling unit or another accessory building. But it is their intention to sever this area off, and they have stated it is their intention to construct a one-story bungalow, which would have a similar height to like a one-story detached accessory building that you would find in the area. So it was highlighted in the report. There was a development concept that was supplied on the site plan. At this stage, it is conceptual. It could vary to some degree, but there's been technical studies that demonstrate that it can work on a property of this size, and of a house of that size as well, with a septic system. That's been demonstrated through a hydrogeological assessment. And they'd also, through a building permit process, need to obtain an engineered septic design. With respect to privacy, any specific measures to mitigate potential privacy impacts, such as fencing or the planting of trees, would be strictly between the applicant and neighboring property owners. The comments that were provided were attached to the report, and it's my understanding that some are in attendance tonight and may choose to speak on the application as well. So again, staff are of the opinion that the technical aspects of the lot creation and development have been adequately addressed at this stage. Logical development of the property will proceed if this were approved tonight through implementation of the proposed conditions, again being creation of the entrance and then the future approvals that would come as part of a building permit process, being a lot grading and drainage plan is one of them. Staff recommend that this application be approved subject to the conditions outlined in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Is the applicant in attendance? Would you like to come forward and speak on the application? Yeah?
Is it just here? Thank you. Good evening, for the opportunity to address you and to say a few words. Thank you for Cameron for that detailed explanation. I think everything he said stands. There's nothing to add to the technical part of it. The lot does comply. There is no minor variances required. It's a fully functioning, developable lot. I did read the comments from some of our neighbors. The only thing I wanted to say this evening was in regards to those comments. I understand that they have concerns over privacy. I think people don't like to see things change. I understand that. That seems to be the way of the world for most of us. But in regards to the privacy and the distances between our homes, our home or the proposed home would be almost double the distance from any of the homes that are in their front yards or even in their side yards. So as far as privacy concerns, even the drive lane that's being addressed, it would just be for our own family's 2 vehicles. Both of these homes front onto Notre Dame. As everybody knows, Notre Dame is quite a busy road. I can't imagine that our two vehicles would cause more of an adverse impact than what they've already been accustomed to. Beyond that, I wouldn't like to get into anything too detailed that would cause any further degradation in my relation with my neighbors. When my wife and I just moved into the neighborhood, actually, they were the first two people that we met, and were both very kind and very nice to us. I'd like to kind of leave it there. So, any questions before I leave?
Yeah, why don't we move to that if there's questions for the applicant, and then I'll invite others forward. Mr. Ross.
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you to the applicant. I'm assuming that the driveway of the proposed severance will have to cross the floodplain. Now, have you had any conversations with Grand River, is there any concerns on their behalf about that?
Not at all. If you have the severance sketch before you there, the drive lane is an existing drive lane that's been there for, I think, 20 some odd years. And it passes down on the easterly side on that narrow strip that you see there. So that's already been in place. There's a detached shop and a turning circle in the back, which is directly beside the two homes that are, I guess, expressing some concern. So that is not in the floodplain. There's a 1.2 acre section that is outside of the floodplain. So any and all development would have to be contained within that higher area.
Of course.
Just on another note as well, you'll see on this picture here, our property lines touch 11 other homes. Two of them are here this evening. The other 11, the majority of them we've had conversations with are fully supportive of the application, that actually like the things that we've been doing. At some point, 20 some odd years ago, this was a farmer's field, and it was just kept clean. And the homeowner planted the row of spruce trees, which is where the dividing line is. And beyond the spruce trees, he never maintained it. So for 20 some odd years, everything just kind of grew wild. Wherever it grew, 5 foot tall grass and bushes, trees in all sorts of places. And what happens is, at the very bottom of the screen there, where it touches to Snyder's Road, two different water sources, I guess, converge there, and it passes underneath Snyder's Road, and it can back up, and it'll flood the very house in the very bottom on Snyder's next to our piece there. They actually get water halfway up their property in the springtime. And when we came in this year and we cut down a bunch of trees, what was happening was, for 20 some odd years, the leaves were dropping trees, and it was just creating a barrier, wasn't allowing the water to permeate into the soil. And since we cut down the trees, both of those neighbors on Snyder's came out to thank us for the change that we made to the property. They're grateful they can see again. It's not as messy. Also, apparently coyotes converge on this property, and the neighbors were always afraid of their dogs being outside and the coyotes would come through. But since we cleared out these trees, the leaves, and a lot of this stuff, the debris that was there for 20 some odd years, the neighbor left his property to come and say thank you, because it was the first time in that many years that he didn't get water halfway up his yard. So I know what we're doing is beneficial. Every property needs to have some sort of maintenance to it. So like I said, out of the 11 homeowners, I understand people don't like to see things change, but I don't believe that what we're doing is going to affect anybody in a very negative way.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any more?
Thank you.
You're good, mister? Thank you. So I will invite anybody in the audience that would like to speak for or against this application forward. We'll do that one at a time. And again, if just as a reminder, please state your name and your address, and then for the record, and then we'll be happy to hear from you.
My name's Brian Kniffel. Address is 1250 Notre Dame Drive. My only concern would be drainage. I don't know if any studies have been done on the drainage once this happens. I am a little familiar with the drainage around Wilmot Township. They put a drain in front of my property that is probably not caught a drop of water since it was put in, except rainwater. And so my lot is fairly wet at the front. The other thing that I've found, I have the original draft plan from the original subdivision. The high water line on that plan ends up at the northwest corner of my lot. On the new one, it comes down, it's changed down to the southwest corner. I'm not sure how that happened, if if that's any concern. And I see the septic bed is going to be pretty close to the back corner. Again, my only concern is that there's probably a lot of water coming down from the new driveway. I'm sure there's going to be pavement and stuff. I'm not sure if they have to do a raised bed, but as long as the drainage is looked after properly, I don't have an issue. That would be my only concern.
Thank you. Cameron, go ahead.
Yeah, I can address some of those comments. The first being with respect to lot grading and drainage. So at this stage, should this application be approved tonight, it's simply dealing with the creation of this lot. The next stage would be the stepping toward looking to obtain application for a building permit. And so once that is done, they would essentially need to come up with basically a development concept in terms of a house and firm things up and get an approved lot grading and drainage plan prior to us even accepting a building permit. So we need to know that it can work. A lot of this size, it's expected that there would be some drainage solutions on this property, but there are still several reviews that need to occur for the actual building permit to be issued to ensure that drainage isn't going to negatively impact the surrounding properties in this instance. So there is that level of degree of review that still needs to occur as part of a building permit process. Again, the lot grading and drainage piece that still needs to occur. And in addition to that, as part of an entrance permit, they may look at the existing driveway that abuts some of those rear lots and see if anything else needs to be done, because they're going to look at the driveway piece as a whole. So there's several things that need to be satisfied with our infrastructure services department with respect to lot grading and drainage. Again, this is dealing with the creation of this lot. Secondly, with respect to floodplain and the way GRCA does their floodplain mapping is essentially a lot of it is modeled. And so as further information becomes available throughout the decades, they're continually updating that mapping. And so in this case, the applicant was actually required to do a topographical survey. So to go out and actually survey the limits of where the floodplain ends. And so that's, again, why you're seeing a little bit of a difference in decades. It's GRCA mapping historically has been modeled, and it's based off other surveys and things that have been done in the area. That information is then provided publicly, but as further studies and surveys occur throughout time, they're continually updating that mapping. But a lot of it is modeled, because as you can imagine, applying floodplain limits to the entirety of the Grand River watershed and Waterloo region, some of it needs to be modeled to some degree. And again, the discrepancy you're seeing is after it's been surveyed and verified. So that was one of the things that GRCA requested as well, just to ensure that it's been surveyed and without a doubt, the buildable concept will be outside of it. Again, through a future building permit process, they'll also need a GRCA permit. So there's that second level of protection with GRCA as well.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking. Oh, sorry, Mr. Roth. Go ahead.
I have a question of Mr. Knipfel. Mr. Knipfel, good evening. It's been a long time. Could, just for the sake of interest, which house is yours?
It's the second one from the service station.
Okay. Just out of interest to know, we have the map, but I didn't know which was your place. So thank you very much.
I'd like to invite anybody else who would like to speak on this application. Seeing no one. Committee members, do we have any further questions for staff or the applicant? Go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Miller. I was a little confused with the Grand River Conservation Authority request. Having been involved with Grand River for a long, long time, I thought that they usually just always set it down in cold facts. This is where it is and this is how it's going to be. But you were alluding to the fact that that line actually might change with the topographical survey?
Yes, Mr. Roth, to some degree, in a minor sense, it would change. That's not to suggest that suddenly swaths of land would, magically open up and no longer be in the floodplain, but it is refined because it's modeled based on information that they have at their office. It does change to a slight degree. This area in behind has largely always been outside of the floodplain to some extent because otherwise that permit wouldn't have been available for that garage, which is nearby the proposed house. But a lot of their policies have changed throughout the years as different regulations and provincial governments have changed certain things. That's not the case here. There are different environmental features, right? So they look at river slopes, erosion allowances, as well as wetlands and floodplains. So there are various different things, and in this case, we're speaking directly to a floodplain. So that's been verified as part of the research that they wanted done prior to this application reaching here.
Would it be safe to assume it would be a wild stretch for that line to impact the proposed area of the home or the accessory buildings?
Yeah, based on the topographical that was done at this point, a surveyor was actually required to verify that. And subsequently to this application, if it is approved, again, through a building permit process, GRCA is going to continue to be involved. So they're going to review drawings for a septic system and a house, and presumably, again, they're going to be very sure that it's well outside of the floodplain. And in their comments, they said that they're supportive of the application because they're confident that a developable portion and a developable envelope, exists outside of the floodplain.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Is there something you'd like to just briefly bring forward?
So, just in case it wasn't clear, based on this drawing, you see the way the lot is outlined in the bold lines, and then through the middle there's a faint line that kind of snakes through the middle of the yard. That is the extent of the floodplain. So everything between the dividing line, like where the house is and the shop and the proposed septic, everything has to fit within that section. Beyond that section is no development allowed. So it didn't make sense. I didn't understand it at first either, but that is the dividing line for everybody that might be concerned.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to move and ask if the committee could make a motion on this application. Moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Ms. Kohler. All in favor? And that motion is carried. And we have one more, back to Mr. Forwell.
Yes, BO9/24 back to 1685 Nafziger Road. So this application is proposing to actually sever the lands that were outlined in the previous minor variance application, approximately 0.08 hectares from 1685 Nafziger Road as a lot addition to 1693 Nafziger Road. So I'll just get the sketch off of the screen because that does not apply here. Again, the subject property is its existing non-farm lot, and with the approval of the previous minor variance application, the proposed lot addition would leave the retained portion and the severed portion both as fully compliant within Zone 1 agricultural. Really the intent of why the applicant is proceeding with this application is to satisfy Grand River Conservation Authority's regulations with respect to setbacks to a wetland. It's their intent to construct accessory agricultural building. And, in spite of the fact that 1693 Nafziger Road is over 16 hectares in size, much of it is regulated. And so this triangular piece is actually to provide a buildable envelope for this agricultural building that they're wanting to construct. GRCA was, of course, circulated on the application, and they had no concerns. And again, following the previous approval of minor variance AO7/24, the retained lot would fully comply with the regulations of Zone 1. The area in question, again, is a small, irregular, triangular parcel, so it's not anticipated that it's going to impact the property owner's ability to replace a septic system in the future because of its size, and the area in question is also quite small. It's staff opinion that, again, it wouldn't impact this. In circulating the application, staff again did not receive any concerns and are recommending approval of the consent.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to speak? No? Is there any questions from the committee on this application? Seeing none, could I get a motion from the committee on this application? Ms. Lalonde, moved by Ms. Lalonde, seconded by Mr. Roth. Can I get it all in favor? And that motion is carried. So we have one more item for tonight, and that is to approve the minutes from our last meeting. Could I get a motion to approve these minutes? Moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Ms. Kohler. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you all for attending and for your input. That's all we have for tonight. Thank you.